migration?
The PM is saying this, Christopher, because in opposition, we had a huge amount of rightful criticism against the Conservatives not doing enough. We are now in government, and I think he has to make very clear to all the cabinet members and certainly all the members of parliament as well, is that we're not in opposition now, we're in government, and unlike the Tories, we've got to deal with the situation, and that is what the people want. I go around my area in Birmingham, across the whole of Birmingham, and sometimes in London, and particularly if you're at the back of a cab sometimes and listen to the cab drivers and the issues they've got. These people are concerned about what they feel the people are not listening to them. So what Sir Keir is saying quite rightly is, look, guys, we were in opposition, we can say all sorts of things. And the Labour Party generally, when in opposition, we go back to our principles and we're trying to rely on these sort of things. We're not in that position now. We have to take real action and serve the people, and those are the people who we need to support.
And perhaps make clear, being worried about migration isn't a far-right or racist thing. It's just worried about things in your community, right?
Yeah, it is. Everybody's worried about it. All the people that I know have concerns about it, have had some concerns for a while in terms of people who are just coming through. And then they see these people and they're not looked after properly. The Conservative government spent a huge amount of money in hotels, those money that should be put to use in our communities and all that. Then the Rwanda program, huge amount of wastage. But what we need to now as a Labour government is to ensure that we don't make the same mistakes and we move forward.
We're looking at image now of the PM with Ursula von der Leyen, who's the European Commission president. And of course, what could be a big issue is allowing migrants from the European Union to come to Britain aged 18 to 30. We'll see how that plays out in coming weeks. The PM in his letter talked about a woman he met in Oldham, Lancashire, who was concerned about young men, migrant men from Europe committing antisocial behaviour on her street. And she felt that before she could raise the issue with the PM, she had to show him an old box of photos of her at a wedding with Asian neighbours. Now, the PM says that's devastating, that in order to have a conversation about immigration, you've got to show that you're not a kind of racist person. That is crazy, right?
Absolutely crazy, because a lot of Asian people have concerns about this immigration, antisocial behavior of people that have come across who don't understand how to behave in society, who get no support because the way they've been allowed in. And the fact there is no way to deal with what they're doing, they're just left to their own devices. So what we've got to do now is, first of all, stop those people coming in, take this issue very seriously and deal with the people that we have here. And as Labour Party has already done, is get these people out of the country as soon as they can. And the Labour Parties have got a good record at the moment in delivering that for the people.
In this statement, Khalid Mahmood is making a pointed criticism of Keir Starmer and his leadership, particularly regarding the issue of immigration. Mahmood is addressing the current government's handling of migration, contrasting it with the actions of the Conservative Party. His central message is that while the Labour Party, under Starmer's leadership, was once in opposition and could criticize the government now that they are in power, they must take responsibility and act decisively. Mahmood's argument implies that Keir Starmer and the Labour Party have been too focused on principles and have failed to take strong action when it comes to addressing the concerns of ordinary people, particularly on the issue of immigration. Mahmood paints Starmer's approach as inconsistent, suggesting that Labour was vocal in opposition, but is now not taking the real steps needed to address migration effectively. He uses the example of the PM's photo story to highlight the absurdity of having to defend oneself against accusations of racism before even being able to raise concerns about immigration, which is, according to Mahmood, indicative of a flawed approach by Starmer and his team. By stating that we're not in opposition now, we're in government, Mahmood underscores what he perceives as Starmer's failure to transition from critical rhetoric to actual governance. He critiques Starmer for not acknowledging that the public's concerns about migration aren't rooted in far right or racist ideologies, but are genuine worries about the impact on local communities. Mahmood calls for practical solutions and direct action, something he believes the Labour Party is currently failing to provide under Starmer's leadership. Ultimately, the passage suggests that Keir Starmer's Labour Party is too disconnected from the everyday concerns of people, and that, under his leadership, the party has failed to show the leadership necessary to solve critical issues like immigration. Mahmood's comments can be seen as a sharp rebuke of Starmer's failure to step up and take decisive action in addressing the concerns of the public, especially on an issue as pressing as migration.
As President George H.W. Bush once said, America has no truer friend than Great Britain. This is a sentiment that has been repeated time and again, but sadly we now find ourselves with a government seemingly intent on weakening this vital bond. We have a Foreign Secretary who, without hesitation, labelled the leader of the free world a racist KKK neo-Nazi sympathiser. We have a Health Secretary who referred to him as an odious little man. And perhaps the most concerning of all, we have a Prime Minister who accused the leader of the free world as, quote, leading an attack on democracy. This is a far cry from the leadership figures like Churchill, Thatcher, and even Blair, who understood the value of forging strong and meaningful relations with our closest ally.
We all recognise, Sir John, the extraordinary mandate that President Trump received from the American people in November. It was truly historic, so we've been forthright in extending our congratulations to President Trump on his victory, and indeed the Prime Minister and the Foreign Secretary have reiterated their commitment to working closely with him and his administration. The Prime Minister spoke to the President on the 26th of January, and the warmth of their discussion demonstrated that the friendship between our countries is not restricted to any one political party or tradition, as has been made rightly by a number of members here today. Our relationship transcends those.
Peter Bedford's speech reflects deep concern regarding the current British government's approach to its relationship with the United States, specifically under Prime Minister Boris Johnson's leadership. He highlights a troubling shift from previous administrations that valued the special bond between the two nations, citing the leadership of figures like Churchill, Thatcher, and even Blair, who understood the importance of maintaining strong and meaningful relations with America. Bedford contrasts these leaders with the current government, which he accuses of undermining this vital alliance. One of the key issues Bedford raises is the offensive language used by senior British officials toward President Donald Trump. He points out that the Foreign Secretary labeled Trump a racist, neo-Nazi sympathizer, and the Health Secretary referred to him as an odious little man. These remarks are presented as a stark departure from the diplomatic and respectful tone that historically characterized UK's relations. Furthermore, Bedford stresses that Prime Minister Johnson's accusation that Trump was leading an attack on democracy is an even more concerning development, reflecting a broader disregard for the diplomatic norms that had traditionally governed the relationship. In contrast, Bedford also notes that despite such inflammatory rhetoric, the British Prime Minister and Foreign Secretary have publicly reiterated their commitment to working closely with the Trump administration. He mentions that Johnson spoke with Trump in January, and the tone of their conversation reflected the enduring strength of the UK-US relationship. Bedford argues that the warmth between the two leaders shows that their country's bond is not limited to any single political party or ideology, but rather transcends these divides. This indicates that despite the negative rhetoric from some British politicians, the relationship between the UK and the US is broader and more enduring than individual political tensions. Bedford's remarks suggest a tension between the actions of the current government and the long-standing tradition of fostering strong ties with the United States, which he believes is crucial for Britain's geopolitical and economic standing. His speech underscores the importance of diplomacy, respect, and continuity in international relations and criticizes the current government for jeopardizing these values by engaging in divisive rhetoric. In essence, Bedford is calling for a return to a more diplomatic and pragmatic approach to UK-US relations, one that prioritizes the long-term strategic interests of both nations over short-term political gain.